public affairs, politics, opinions, and discussion. This is The Issue on your TV. I'm Mark Carr, and on this edition of The Issue, we'll be having a look at a unique business in the cannabis industry. But first, my co-host today is Region and City Councillor for Ward 6, Angelo Bentavegnia. Angelo, how are you doing?
Doing fine, Mark, and thank you very much. I'm probably going to be doing better as we move along on this show, talking about cannabis. Always good. Always good.
As long as we don't get samples and we don't test them on air, then everything is fine. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Angelo, to introduce our guests today.
Well, thank you, Mark, and our guest is Jivan Sanghera, and Jivan is quite the entrepreneur. He runs a local mortgage brokerage company here in Burlington. He's a lifelong Burlingtonian, and he's been at it since about 2005. And I recently found out that he is moved on to a different venture, and he is now going to be part of the cannabis industry, and he's secured a retail operation in Hamilton, actually. So, and we'll go through it. The name of the company, I understand, is called Sparkle, and there you go. And a nice leaf in the front. And let's hope our Leafs tonight do better than they did the other night.
Well, whoa, wait a second. You've got a Habs fan here, and I'm really surprised that Angelo, you're not a Habs fan, being from Montreal.
That is correct. I'm from, I grew up in Montreal, but I've always been a Leaf fan and proud of it. So. Anyways, without further ado, Jivan, why don't you tell us what got you into the interest of owning a retail cannabis store? That's number one question. But number two question is, I understand you had to do some convincing with your family.
I'd say, yeah.
You are not a drug dealer. So let's talk about that.
That's one way to put it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation today. Mark, you seemed far smarter than a guy to be a Habs fan, but I guess you learn something new every day. Jokes aside, to both sides of this coin on the hockey thing, just to get this out of the way. All we were all hoping for was a classic series. And I think that we have gotten that in spades. And it's been so exciting to watch. And it's been so much fun going back and forth with our friends that are Habs fans and Leafs fans. This is what hockey's all about to me. So I've absolutely loved every moment of it. And as a season seat member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm very happy that they're also letting in 550 fans today. Inoculated healthcare workers. I think that's amazing. So, that aside, thank you for that unique introduction, Angelo. For those who know me here in Burlington, I'm the president and broker of record of a company called Circle Mortgage Group. Thank you to everybody in our city who was kind enough to vote us number one for the Burlington Post Reader's Choice Awards and for the Burlington Community Votes. Our relationship at Circle with our clientele is one about service and clarity of offering. My scenario in Sparkle Cannabis Company follows very much the same model. And what I mean about that is that I believe that there's still an opportunity in cannabis retail, and I apologize for that continuous notification noise on my side. I hope you guys can't hear it. But what my goal is to offer cannabis in a format that is clear and easy to understand for people that don't necessarily consume cannabis, right? A lot of people that come to our mortgage company have never dealt with a mortgage broker before. A lot of people that have come to our cannabis store have never bought cannabis in a legal retail environment before. Growing up, if there was ever times that somebody wanted to partake in cannabis, it was really just a kind of a phone call to somebody that you didn't want to talk to regularly, with a meeting place in a place that you didn't want to visit regularly. and a travel back to your place of residence where you really didn't want to get pulled over either. All of that has gone by the wayside, and a lot of the arguments against legal cannabis are usually found in things that just aren't true, right? Many people will point to legal cannabis and say, well, it's too expensive. Gentlemen, I can tell you today, I could sell you 28 grams of cannabis in dried flower form for under $100. If you were to take a look at the legacy market, which, and they call it legacy, I'm guessing that's to be polite to criminals that are involved in it. But if you were to take a look at the quote unquote underground market, people are paying upwards of, between $180 and $220 for an ounce of cannabis that they have no source data on, that there's been no testing on, that you have no idea what part of the plant it came from. You really don't know the terpene profile. You have no idea the efficacy. You really don't know what you're smoking or consuming. And for me, when I take a look now and I see that the economies of scale are starting to come online for these licensed producers, and costs, the weekly purchasing price of cannabis is falling. So consumers should expect to see falling prices in that area as well. So now let's compare what our two offerings are. We take a look at the traditional market, and for those who choose to grow their own, God bless you. I couldn't grow my own tomatoes to save my life, so I'm definitely not going to grow my own cannabis. So when it comes to what is available for people, we are now in a scenario where we can offer you cannabis in a pre-rolled format, if you're not into that, into making your own. We can offer it as dried flower. We can offer it as tinctures. We can offer it as lotions and potions. Haven't seen a potion yet, but I have seen some lotions. And then, and it's available in edible formats here in Ontario as well. There's other provinces in Ontario that do not allow for edibles and concentrates like Quebec. But here in Ontario, we have an open, regulated market. In my first week of business in Hamilton now, we're located right at 778 Concession Street, just east of the Juravinsky Hospital. And I've had people, I've been standing on the sidewalk, Angelo, something I learned from you, but I've been standing on the sidewalk and greeting my neighbors as they're walking by. And a lot of the conversations we're having is their traditional method of purchasing and procuring cannabis versus what we're offering them and the convenience of that. And, and the uptake so far has been great. We had as a matter of the licensing process, we had a lot of, we'll call them speed bumps to deal with. But a lot of that was around people's perception of this industry. And, as somebody, I don't believe this industry has an advocacy group yet. I believe that that's something still in the making. But there is a lot of smart people in this room and the cannabis space in general. So you have a large group of people that are, buying their ticket and, investing their life savings without the necessary, I would feel, necessary business and retail background. But hopefully those people have gotten a good group of professionals around them to guide them. For those of us that do have some business and retail experience, for me, it became something that was a very exciting new opportunity, right? Where I really believe that this industry is in its infancy, and that it's a great time to really kind of, quote unquote, throw our hat in the ring.
Jivan,
yeah.
let me ask you, how do you overcome the critics out there that are saying this is a source, an entry point into harder drugs for our youth? How would you respond to that?
I would respond. So that's a very, very strong question you just asked me, right? At the end of the day, it's our responsibility as parents to ensure that our youth understand what they are going to see in their day-to-day life. I believe it's as a society as well. It's very important for us to make sure that our children understand what they're going to see out there. But as a matter of cannabis as a gateway drug, I respectfully and vehemently disagree with that notion. And the reason I say that is that people that understand cannabis understand that if you were to, dependency, we can develop a dependency on a cup of coffee, right? We could develop a dependency, on a glass of wine just to end our evening, because that has just become part of our routine. So addiction and routine are two very different things in my world. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not an addiction expert, and nor am I even beginning to kind of step on their toes, because I can tell you that from my personal experience, the only gateway it opened is to a box of pizza. But in the same regard, just like we all have different fingerprints, the way our bodies react to cannabis is different for every single one of us. And the good thing about my scenario is I am not licensed to give medical advice, and I have no desire to give medical advice. What I have the desire to do is for people that qualify, and I use qualified because they're 19 plus, they are not showing signs of intoxication, they've been able to produce identification to prove that they are themselves. If that person comes to our door, we are happy to sell them up to 30 grams of dried flower or its equivalent in a legal format. And that legal format does address many of the concerns that people would have. As a matter of a gateway drug, is caffeine a gateway to nicotine? Is alcohol a gateway to cannabis? I believe that I would rather that we did not try and group this into something that the society should look at negatively. When you
but Jivan, very well that those that are opposed to it are drawing that connection.
Yes, and I would respectfully, I respectfully respect their opinion, right? So if somebody's not going to take their opinion based on science, and is not going to look into the science of it, and they're still going to have their generalization associated with their predisposition or prejudices that they have in their mind, which imagine that, right? It could happen. Then there's nothing I can do about that. And nor am I here to do something about that. I'm here to serve people that want to be served. And my thought is that if we can display the data to them in a very clear and concise format, which is what will certainly make our store unique by spades. But if we are able to show people that, then at the end of the day, people are making an educated decision on a product that they want to try or that they already use and want to try a variety of.
So, Jivan, I got a quick question that, thank you for those answers, by the way. Can we talk a little bit to the audience about how we get a license? So, for example, here in Burlington, we have 21 actual licenses of retail cannabis. Hamilton.
Hopefully 22 soon.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully 22 soon, but yeah.
And in Hamilton, there's actually, and I just read this a couple of days ago, there's up to 50 either licensed or businesses being reviewed to get a license from the province.
Yeah.
So we all know that the rules have changed. Way back when we had the lottery situation, and now we no longer have the lottery situation. Can you talk to us about what the difference is, what it takes to get a license?
Sure.
The process, maybe if you can, if you'd like, if you're in the means of telling us the costs involved, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So as a matter of, so you mentioned the lotteries, right? So we had the 2 lotteries take place. That was a very frustrating situation because you had people, again, that were buying a $75 ticket to their future with no real, I don't want to say business plan, but in a large percentage of those situations, I can tell you that those people probably did not buy that ticket with a business plan. Now, for those that were lucky enough to win, there's a major retailer in Hamilton called Sessions Cannabis, and Sessions, the owner of Sessions, won the lottery and had a relationship with Canna Cabana and then moved to open his own franchise scenario. for those people, like you can't really get mad at somebody for getting lucky. But for my scenario, so I was a participant in both of those without success. And then this time, when the system was rejigged to be more about your ability to present yourself as a viable business person, it wasn't something that I was going to wait on. Do I have my own frustrations with process in dealing with bureaucrats? Yes, imagine that. There is some frustration in dealing with bureaucracy. But at the end of the day, my communication with the AGCO from the first moment was that we already work in a highly regulated industry, which is mortgages. Maybe one of the most regulated industries that, in all honesty, still needs some more regulation. But, this isn't a conversation about mortgages. It's a conversation about marijuana. So for the, as a matter of process, so the first thing you need to do is get your certified retail operator's license. And then if you have secured a location, you can also start for a certified retail store authorization. So they're two totally different paths. I took one path before the other. Some people are, doing concurrent applications for their operator's license and their store. In my world, too many things can go wrong for me to have taken that level of risk. It was a matter of walk before we run. So we got our store authorized, we got our operator's license. And at that point began the process of trying to convince my current landlord that I would not be a drug dealer. And get the retail store authorization in progress. Now, there was another application just east of me that was about 3 months ahead of me in posting and that sort of stuff. And we've been successful in opening before them. And, a lot of this is surrounding yourself with the right team members. I didn't learn mortgages on my own. I didn't learn cannabis on my own either. I've been very fortunate to have friends that have lit the path for me in both industries. And, when you have that sort of support, somebody's just a lot more comfortable in making the financial investments that we've had to make. The investment is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not in the tens or in the ones. But at the end of the day, we're very fortunate that we're able to do so, with a fair amount of debt involved. But in the same regard, I don't enter into business scenarios without my eyes wide open. And in this case, I do believe that we've developed a process and a product line. We didn't develop the product line. We'll be presenting the product line, but in a way that is a little bit different than what's going on in the marketplace today. But as a matter of process, frustration. And then once you get your boots on the ground, though, your frustration turns to elation when you're able to see something that, no lie, guys, 4 years ago, this was a dream, right? This shirt was a dream. Angelo, you and I joke, but in 2014, I ran for city council. This was the last nail in that coffin. I'm not stupid. Right? Pardon my say for a second. I realize that people will have their own opinion on my entry to this marketplace, just like my family members have had their own opinion. And, we were joking about it initially, but I even talked about it in a newspaper article I was featured in. Convincing my father was probably the hardest thing I had to do in this process, not just because he's my landlord in my first store, but because here we are, having built a bit of a community presence, having built a bit of a name with Circle Mortgage Group, having gotten to know some of the people that I really am thankful to know, two of which are included in this interview right now. The last thing I want is to people to start to perceive me as something other than a business person. Right? Because this is a commodity. It's a completely legal sale. It's hilarious. I had somebody that was a purveyor of cannabis in the non-legal space walk past my store on the day of opening. And I was on the street just kind of saying hello to people as they walk by. And this gentleman, who shall remain nameless, said to me, he was like, "Oh, if you want to make some real money, I've got some oil that I just made at home, and I'll bring it by and you can sell it. And I was like, oh, sir, I'm like, we are a legally authorized store. We can only sell what we can buy from Ontario Cannabis Supply. And then he winked at me and he's like, yeah, but if you want to make some real money, I can drop off a tray. And I was like, wow. I was like, that's very kind of you. I'm like, so it sounds like a plan too. I'm like, here's the steps. And he's like, what? I'm like, first, contact Health Canada, get your product licensed. I'm like, after that, after you're done that, send it to the OCS and ask for them to list it. And once you've completed those 2 steps, come knock on this door so I can buy a large amount of your product and sell it for you. Right. And he had a laugh and he's like, well, I guess you're my competition then. And I'm like, well, I got friends that are mortgage brokers as well. So that's okay. Where, at the end of the day, I believe that people that are participating in that space will unfortunately always have a presence because there's things that they sell that some people want that is not legal.
Let me ask Angelo a question, because he was one of the few that did not want cannabis stores in Burlington. So have you modified your stance, Angelo, on cannabis stores?
Well, I'll give you my, there's two answers to that question. One, cannabis is legal. So yes, from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with cannabis. I'm not a participant in that field personally. But what I am having difficulty with is what I believe is happening now, and I was going to get into it a little later on, with clustering of stores, which I think is an issue. I asked a question back in 2018, that what you're referring to, Mark, when I voted against opting in. I asked a simple question: if I win a lottery license, can I sell that store? And the answer then was no. But the answer now is yes. So I'm not sure what the process is in doing that. I was going to ask Jivan that question, but those are the things that were unknown back then. And to this point, they're still a little bit unknown. So that's really what I'm concerned about: the clustering, the selling of product. I've been in the business world since I was 12, and I've been involved in franchising, which is basically what we're talking about with cannabis. The franchisor is the province. Now, when you open a franchise store, you have to buy certain things from the franchisor. Doesn't mean that I can't sort of every once in a while, like Jivan was bringing up, that oil, and all of a sudden, I'm not registering that particular point. So those are the unknowns at this point. So
if I could interject on that one, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Angelo, for the level of risk that those of us have taken financially, I can tell you that it would be a complete and utter lack of intelligence for somebody to risk selling a non-registered product. We don't. So the structure and the rules of what the Ontario government has put in place is actually very stringent. We're subject to audits whenever they would like. They are allowed to come in and inspect the store whenever they would like. We literally have to have records and video records of every time we're checking an identification. We have full video records of, every angle of our stock room with no blind spots available. So all of that sort of stuff is stuff that we as professionals, of course, is there going to be that 1% to 2% out there that will try and circumvent the system and do that? Yes, brother. But in the same regard, those people exist in every industry, whether it's an auto mechanic, a grocery store, or a Shoppers Drug Mart. Like, those people just exist everywhere. So we can't make the false assumption that this is only going to be sold by saints. It's not, right? But in the same regard, that's why it's twice as important for our process here in Ontario to be so stringent. I've already had another retail store offered to me literally for $0 and just to assume the lease. Now, you talk about cluster. right? The clustering is frustrating for anybody that's investing, right? Because at the end of the day, this is a it really is a geolocated business, right? So as much as it might make all the sense in the world for me to be $1 cheaper than the guy across the city, realistically, who's going to drive across the city for that dollar? If it's me and it's on a gas price or a bag of milk, I'll probably do it, right? But that's just because I was born in raised in the.
When I refer to the clustering, I refer to, for example, the AGCO. I mean, they have a thorough licensing review process, and they have restrictions, schools and so on, distance-wise. What they don't have an authority on is the control over the store locations, and use that plural. So if I wanted to open up or move my cannabis store next door to your store, because the perception is, oh, Jivan's business is doing really well. Now I move it there. Is there that feud that's now concerning,
It's funny you say that. Where we opened, so at the corner of Concession and East 32nd, my dad bought a laundromat in 1985, put a second floor on that. It's a fourplex. Guess what literally opened next door to him?
The laundromat.
Yeah. And guess what the city did for him?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's legally zoned, right? So that's why zoning rules exist, right? So as a matter of cluster, is it good for the retailers participating in that level of competition? Not at all. And if you take a look at the amount of applications in the system right now versus the amount that will probably still be open 5 years from now, I would estimate that it'll be 60 to 70% of what you see today.
Jivan, that shakeout will occur in most industries. But you know something, that we're out of time, guys. We could go on for another half an hour very easily.
Sure.
But I'd like to thank our guest, Jivan Sanghera of Circle Mortgage and
Sparkle Cannabis Company.
And Sparkle Cannabis. And of course, to my co-host, Region and City Councillor for Ward 6, Angelo Bentavegnia. You can watch The Issue Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. with repeats throughout the week on Channel 700. I'm Mark Carr for The Issue on your TV. Truly local. Stay safe and healthy.